Hi, this is Charlie with Boxing Focus, and an interesting weekend. The debut of PBC, Al Heyman's baby. Supposed to bring us competitive fights. Brought us really one-sided fights, which all three were fairly predictable, if you ask me. I mean, I sided with the winners in all of them, although I didn't put up a video for Maras. I didn't think it was worth it. Molina, well, what a shocking performance by John Molina. People say, yeah, that's John Molina for you, that's the way he always fights. But it just, I mean, how was he intending to win that fight? Was he just intending to land one big, wild right hand? Honestly, that was... It beggars belief. I mean, if you saw the weigh-in, Broner looked like he'd really struggled. And it wasn't like, perhaps size that was the reason he was struggling. It just looked like he perhaps had not managed it very well. He looked gaunt. He looked desperate to be told he was at 140. He looked very disappointed that it was at 141. Luckily for him, he didn't have to make 140. He just didn't look very well. And I'll be honest, I almost put up a late video saying, "Oh my God, how strong is Molina looking? How weak is Broner looking?" And I was kind of, having second thoughts about siding with Broner. And then I left it a couple of hours, and I thought, well, firstly, Broner's young, and we've seen that young guys can suffer bad weight cuts. I mean, obviously Brandon Rios is a great example. Chavez Jr. did it quite frequently as well. So then I thought, well, he'll recover okay from that, but it's probably, certainly Broner's not going to stop Molina, looking how strong Molina was. And, but yeah, you couldn't have predicted what a poor performance John Molina would put in. I mean, I guess you could have done. But I think some of the credit has to go to Broner for that. Molina was complaining Broner was running. He certainly wasn't. But what he was doing was he was throwing a lot of feints. He was using very good upper body movement. Certainly much better than we've seen from Broner in recent performances. Certainly much better than the Taylor fight where Broner was getting caught up, stood up straight time and time again. But in this fight, excellent upper body movement. And Molina never seemed to really know where he was. And never let his hands go as a consequence. And it was strange because in a way Broner looked really good, but in other ways he didn't really live up to his billing, and certainly didn't take advantage of the massive disparity in talent in that fight. I mean, Broner had an amazing jab. Possibly got one of the best jabs in those weight classes. He's talking like 140, 147 around there at the moment. And then he was spearing Molina with it over and over again. Right hand, not so much. He used it sparingly. I mean, he threw 500-ish punches, Broner, which about 350 were jabs. And the other 150, were not all right hands. He must have thrown the right hand about 50 times, which really isn't very many. I mean, when he was finding it that easy, where were the combinations? He never put his punches together. And this is the frustration with Broner. This is not something new. I mean, you go back to the Taylor fight. He didn't put his punches together in the Taylor fight until the 12th round. And when he did, and he threw a 5-punch combination finishing with an uppercut, he dropped Taylor with it. Because of the flashy hand speed and the fact that his opponents are wary of it, because Broner punches pretty hard as well. All you got to do is get their eyes off of the final punch. And find a gap or an opening, but you can't do that if you throw 1 or 2 punches at a time, which is all Broner did against Molina. And perhaps he didn't want to take a risk and get Mickey Bade. But if you're billing yourself as the next incarnation of Mayweather, well, you say that, when you put it in those terms, this is the legacy of Floyd Mayweather for the sport. This is what Floyd Mayweather has made. His bread and butter is just picking opponents off and winning convincingly on the scorecards without any drama in the fight. So I guess when you put it like that, that was a perfect performance by Adrian Broner. Anyway, I would like to have seen more from him. I would like to have seen him go after Molina and try and put him down at least, because I think he had it there. But perhaps perhaps the weight cut, perhaps the fact that Molina was very strong. He did sting Broner on a couple of occasions, which even those times when Molina landed, I felt that was kind of Broner's fault. He'd stopped moving, was getting caught with his guard down. I think that was more avoidable for Broner. So I think he's got things to work on if he wants to really win over the boxing public. Moving on to the next fight, Thurman and Guerrero. I mean, the reaction to this fight, you're talking like the post-fight analysis, you're talking about the way people are speaking about what went down, the way Guerrero came back and stuff like this. Or people are giving Guerrero too much credit. People are talking about it as if Thurman hadn't suffered this hideous swelling, this freak clash of heads. It's covering. It was out here. I mean, it was covering his eye as well and down the side of his cheek. It's painful. It's on his mind. It's certainly changed the way he's fighting. It's possibly affecting his vision. That kind of injury, despite suffering it, and Thurman going from being on the front foot and very aggressive, once he started spreading, he started becoming much more evasive and working much more on movement and was pot-shotting instead of putting his punches together. Despite this, he still drops Guerrero. Despite this, he still wins basically every round. I thought giving Guerrero one round, possibly the third, was about all you could give him. The 2 rounds that one judge gave him, I felt, were charity. I mean, despite that, people are going like, yeah, Guerrero did really, he really acquitted himself well for a punching bag. I mean, Guerrero offered very little for big portions of that fight, other than somebody who could take a good shot. He didn't perform much better than John Molina, but because he got up from being dropped and because he managed to give it a go in the 10th round, he gets a load of credit. The lines in this sport are very finely drawn at times. You're talking very close between being a John Molina and being a Robert Guerrero. One's being derided for his performance, the other one's getting all the plaudits. I mean, Guerrero offered very, very little offensively for the vast majority of the fight. Thurman was largely unmarked aside from that ridiculous swelling. And you have to think, I mean, I honestly believe that if they hadn't have had that clash of heads and it hadn't have happened like that, Thurman's going to stop Guerrero, because he was hurting him. He was hurting him throughout the fight. He had him badly hurt at the end of the 6th round. I think he had him hurt earlier than that. It was the 2nd or 3rd round. He caught him with a crushing shot that spanned Guerrero's head around. He saw Guerrero's knees buckle. I think he had him down in the 9th. I think he had him hurt in the 12th. It was just one of those where I think Thurman was busy managing a pretty bad injury, and as a consequence, he was focusing more on making sure he didn't get hit rather than getting his own punches off. And then he did well. He did well. But despite this, Guerrero had lots to say afterwards. He was saying that Thurman didn't hit that hard. I mean, I think your face told a different story, Robert Guerrero. Saying that Eggington hit harder, and that somebody in the boxing scene forums made a great point that if this had been the other way around and Guerrero had fought Thurman as his first fight at welterweight, when Guerrero was fleshy and hadn't yet really put on the muscle required to have grown into the weight class, and then he fights Eggington, like 4 fights later, and perhaps loses, then he would say exactly the same thing in reverse, that Thurman hit harder than Eggington. It was just the fact that he was stronger and more muscular, so could absorb the punches better, and obviously because he'd lost, kind of didn't want to. I don't know. It was being a bit foolhardy about how his ability to take punches. But anyway, getting back on topic, he was saying that Thurman isn't ready for Mayweather. I mean, I thought Thurman beat Guerrero better than Mayweather did. Really, he certainly did much more damage. Perhaps some of the rounds were a little bit closer, but again, Thurman was managing that injury. And everyone forgets Guerrero started very fast in the Mayweather fight. You could arguably have given him the first round. I can't remember the second. It was a long time ago. I just remember that Guerrero basically just stopped throwing punches after the first couple of rounds. But yeah, and then Guerrero's like, yeah, Thurman isn't ready for Mayweather. Well, he's a hell of a lot more ready than you were, son. And I think that Thurman beat a stronger version of Guerrero, because Guerrero looked very strong on the scales. He looked very, very strong on the scales, but so did Thurman. It was a bit different to the Broner Molina situation. But yeah, I was impressed with Thurman. He certainly did more than enough to reaffirm my belief in him, because I certainly rate him very, very, very highly. Would like to have seen perhaps a little bit more of the jab, sometimes neglecting that, instead looking to load up a little bit too much. Perhaps some focus on speed as well as just power. But yeah, he's splitting hairs when it was such a dominant performance, really. But my fighter of the weekend, and there was a lot of boxing this weekend, my fighter of the weekend, actually, I want to award this to two different fighters. Glen Tapia's performance was very good. If you get a chance to see the Glen Tapia fight, absolutely brilliant performance. Absolutely, he just took his man out of there, and he looked very good. He was boxing really well. He was showing much better movement around the ring, much better movement on his feet, much better upper body movement. It was a much harder target to hit, and he was coming back with strong counters, and his opponent Dawson just could not stand up to it. It was a very good performance. And then the other performance of the weekend goes to Sam Eggington, who's I think a guy we should look out for. I don't think he's necessarily going to set the world alight, but he's got an interesting backstory in that apparently when he was 18. I mean, I just read this on Reddit. I don't know really the full details. I'm just recounting a second-hand, probably paraphrase story that when he was 18, he walked into the gym saying his girlfriend's pregnant, he needs to earn money, and he wants to be a journeyman boxer. So yeah, but he's basically not being looked after. He's now 14-2, I believe. Got a couple of losses on his record from early in his career, but he's basically defying the odds, more or less. He's been put in with guys that are, he's supposed to be just another number on their resume, and he's beaten them. And he looks strong. He looks, he knows how to exchange and be the one that's sitting down on his punches. He knows how to pick a good punch, and then he looks really, really good against somebody with a good amateur background in Singleton at the weekend. And again, that's another fight I would recommend that you watch if you can find it and you've got the time. Anyway, it's just Childhood Boxing Focus. I hope you enjoyed this weekend of boxing. It was pretty good. The only shock being, obviously, I mean, it might not be that shocking to some people that Zhu Shiming came up short in his first world title attempt, but it wasn't much of a fight, and I've never really thought that much of Shiming. It's not like I've not seen that much footage of him, but when I've watched it, it's not really made me want to watch anymore. But hopefully he'll turn it around. I hope the best for all fighters, and then we'll see if he can, because he seems to be the torchbearer for Chinese boxing at the moment, which is an awful lot of responsibility. Sometimes these guys are put up on a pedestal, and it's very easy to knock it from underneath them. But that's he will learn, I'm sure. Hopefully he'll do better in his next outing, because I think more good international fighters is good for the boxing community. Anyway, this is Childhood Boxing Focus. Thanks for watching. I was starting to ramble on a little bit. I need more coffee. It's early on a Monday morning.